The arrival of the shepherds was, by all accounts, gentle. One moment, the deep black above New Arcadia was pricked only by distant stars. The next, a soft, pearlescent glow resolved itself into a ship. It was vast, shaped like a smoothed river stone, and it made no sound. It simply hung there, a silent moon where no moon should be. Governor Aris Thorne had seen enough vids from old Earth and other colonies to know this was a first contact scenario, though New Arcadia wasn't exactly Earth's first rodeo with aliens. Still, these were new. He smoothed his slightly rumpled tunic, a nervous habit, and waited. The shepherds, when they finally made contact via a calm, resonant voice that seemed to emanate from the air itself, were polite. They requested permission to send an emissary. Permission was, of course, granted. How do you say no to a silent moon? Emissary Valerius was tall, willowy, and seemed to shimmer faintly. His features were delicate, almost fragile, and his eyes held an ancient, patient sadness. He moved with a grace that made humans look like clumsy sacks of potatoes. Governor Thorne, Valerius said, his voice the same one from the ship, a soothing balm. We are the shepherds. We have watched your species for a time from afar. Aris nodded. Welcome to New Arcadia, Emissary Valerius. What brings you to our small colony? Valerius looked around the governor's modest office, his gaze lingering on a halapic of Thorne's children laughing, their faces bright with competitive spirit during a sack race. Humanity is a species of such vibrant potential, Valerius began, his tone kindly, like a teacher addressing a promising but unruly student. Your capacity for creation, for love, for loyalty, it is remarkable. Eris felt a small swell of pride. Thank you, we try our best. But, Valerius continued, the word gentle but firm, this potential is so often clouded by internal conflict, by aggression, by a relentless, often wasteful, competitive drive that sets you against each other and could, one day, set you against the quieter currents of the galaxy. Eris frowned slightly. Competition can be healthy. It drives innovation. To a point, Valerius conceded. But your history, and even your present entertainments and interactions, are steeped in a glorification of dominance, of struggle. It is like a fever in your species' blood. We wish to offer you a gift, a way to soothe this fever, to allow your higher potentials to blossom, unhindered. He gestured, and a small, floating orb, glowing with the same pearlescent light as their ship, appeared between them. We call this the Serenity Field Generator. When active, it subtly harmonizes emotional frequencies. It does not suppress thought or free will. It simply encourages peace, reduces needless aggression, fosters cooperation. It is an aid to your natural evolution, a step towards a more enlightened state. Eris looked at the orb, then at Valerius. You want to, what? Make us all calm. He felt a prickle of unease. This sounded a bit too much like mind control, however gently phrased. We want to help you become the best version of yourselves, Valerius said, his sincerity seeming absolute. Imagine a society free from petty squabbles, from violent crime, from the urge to dominate. Imagine the resources and energy you could then devote to true progress. It sounded like a utopia. It also sounded terrifyingly bland. But the shepherds were clearly advanced, clearly powerful. Refusing their gift might be unwise. We would need to discuss this, Aris said carefully. Our council. Of course, Valerius agreed, with an air of serene patience that suggested he could wait for centuries if needed. We will leave this prototype with you. We have others. When you are ready, we can deploy them across New Arcadia. It is a gift freely offered. The Colonial Council meeting was tense. Commander Eva Rostova, head of New Arcadia's small but dedicated defense force, was openly skeptical. So, they want to turn us into docile sheep, she'd snorted, her dark eyes flashing. No, thank you. What if there's a real threat? Will we all just want to hug it? They say it doesn't suppress free will, Eva, Aris countered, though he shared some of her concerns. Just aggression. Aggression, drive, ambition. Sometimes it's hard to tell them apart, Governor, Rostova said. Our people came here, across the void, because they had drive. They faced dangers because they had a bit of fight in them. But others on the council were swayed by the shepherd's promise of peace and an end to societal ills. The debate was heated, but the presence of the silent shepherd ship in orbit was a powerful argument in itself. In the end, with heavy reluctance from Thorne and outright opposition from Rostova, the council voted to accept the shepherd's gift. A few days later, smaller shepherd drones, like silver teardrops, descended and placed emitters at strategic points around the colony. Valerius himself supervised, his demeanor one of gentle satisfaction. Around this time, Rostova's defense force was running a standard training exercise in the rocky badlands beyond the main settlement. It was a complex scenario involving simulated hostiles, rescue operations, and a lot of teamwork under pressure. They used training rounds that registered hits with bright light and sound, but the intensity was real. Adrenaline pumped, voices barked commands, and squads moved with practiced, aggressive precision. Observer Kale, a younger shepherd assigned by Valerius to monitor human activities, watched from a rise. His serene features were, for the first time, visibly disturbed. The controlled violence, the shouts, the sheer, focused ferocity of the humans, even in play, seemed to unsettle him deeply. Later, Valerius approached Governor Thorne and Commander Rostova. "Governor, Commander," he began, his tone still kind, but with an edge of reproof. "Observer Kale reported on your military games. While we understand the need for preparedness, such overt displays of primal dominance are perhaps illustrative of the very traits we hope the Serenity Field will help your people transcend." Rostova's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, emissary, that primal dominance is called tactical proficiency. It keeps us safe." Valerius gave a slow, sad blink. "Safety, Commander, is best found in harmony, not in the perfected art of conflict. The Serenity Field is now active. You will see." And with that, a soft hum, almost below the threshold of hearing, began to emanate from the emitters. A faint, sweet scent, like ozone and night-blooming flowers, touched the air. The Serenity Field was online. The first week was quiet, noticeably so. The usual morning rush in the central plaza, with its vendors hawking goods and colonists hurrying to work, was less hurried, less noisy. Arguments in the council chambers, a common occurrence, simply didn't happen. Disagreements were smoothed over with polite, almost listless acquiescence. Children's laughter, once a constant bright sound in the colony's parks and residential areas, became subdued. Their games lost their boisterous edge. Tag was played with less running, more ambling. Imaginative adventures involving pirates or space monsters faded into quiet drawing or dull play. Aris Thorne noticed it in his own office. His staff, usually a hive of energetic, if sometimes chaotic, activity, moved with a placid slowness. Deadlines were still met, but the spark, the creative fire that often led to late-night brainstorming sessions and innovative solutions, was dimming. He mentioned his observations to Valerius during one of their now regular check-ins. "This is merely the initial phase of adjustment, Governor," Valerius assured him, his shimmering form serene. "Your people are learning to let go of unnecessary agitation. Soon, a new, more focused calm will emerge, allowing for deeper, more meaningful productivity." Commander Rostova saw it more starkly in her troops. Drills became rote. The competitive fire that pushed soldiers to outperform each other, to find sharper solutions, flickered and died. Target practice scores remained adequate, but there was no exultation in a perfect shot, no frustration at a miss. Just execution of a task. "They're like robots," she muttered to her second-in-command, Jax, a usually fiery redhead whose hair now seemed a shade duller, matching the muted spark in her eyes. Jax just shrugged. "It's peaceful, I guess, Commander." The artists of New Arcadia were among the first to truly feel the hollowness. Elara, a sculptor known for her passionate, dynamic pieces, found herself staring at a lump of clay for days. The urge to shape it, to wrestle form from the formless, was gone. Her hands felt heavy, her mind blank. Musicians found their melodies becoming simple, repetitive, lacking the emotional highs and lows that gave their work life. Writers stared at empty screens, the vibrant internal worlds they usually explored, now feeling distant and grey. The colony's chief medical officer reported a slight increase in patients complaining of low energy or a lack of motivation. She prescribed rest, unsure what else to do. The shepherd's med scans showed no physiological problems. Even the colony's notorious gossip, Old Man Hemlock, who could usually be found spinning wild tales in the market square, fell silent. His stories, often exaggerated and occasionally malicious, had nonetheless been a strange, unifying thread in the community. Now, he just sat on his usual bench, watching the too quiet world go by with dull eyes. The vibrant, often messy, tapestry of human life in New Arcadia was slowly being bleached of its color, thread by thread. By the third week, the initial quiet had deepened into something far more unsettling. The apathy was palpable, a heavy blanket smothering the colony. It wasn't peace, it was an absence. The absence of joy, of ambition, of frustration, of desire. It was the absence of being truly, messily human. Productivity across all sectors plummeted. Farmers went through the motions of tending their crops, but the innovative agricultural hacks and community-led projects that had made New Arcadia self-sufficient were forgotten. Engineers fixed what broke, but they no longer tinkered, no longer sought to improve. The colony's expansion plans, once a source of excited debate, lay gathering digital dust. Mental health crisis, initially subtle, became more pronounced. It wasn't characterized by outbursts or breakdowns. The Serenity field likely suppressed such overt displays. Instead, it was a creeping despair, a profound anhedonia. Colonists described a feeling of being hollowed out, of watching their own lives from a great distance. It's like the color has drained from the world, one woman whispered to the medical officer, her voice flat. I know I should care about things, about my children, my work. But I just don't, not really. Governor Thorne felt it too. The weight of his responsibilities, once a burden he carried with a certain grim satisfaction, now just felt heavy. He found himself staring out his office window for long stretches, the vibrant landscape of New Arcadia looking flat and uninteresting. He tried to discuss his growing alarm with Valerius. Emissary, Thorne said, forcing energy into his voice. My people are fading. This isn't harmony. This is emptiness. Valerius tilted his head, his ancient eyes holding a hint of something Aris couldn't quite decipher: pity, confusion. Governor, what you perceive as fading is merely the shedding of unnecessary emotional turbulence. Your species is highly attached to its passions, its conflicts. Letting them go can feel like a loss, initially, but what replaces it is a deeper, more stable equilibrium. But we're losing ourselves, Aris insisted, a flicker of his old fire returning. Our drive, our creativity, our very will to strive for something more, it's dying. Valerius remained placid. Striving implies discontent, Governor. True peace is found in acceptance. Commander Rostova watched her defense force with a cold knot of dread in her stomach. Her soldiers, once proud and alert, now moved like sleepwalkers. Their uniforms were neat, their equipment maintained, but their eyes were vacant. During a routine patrol, a perimeter sensor malfunctioned, a situation that would normally have them scrambling to diagnose and fix the issue with quick, competitive efficiency. Instead, they stared at the blinking warning light with dull comprehension, waiting for orders, devoid of initiative. Rostova tried to rally them. Come on, people. What's the problem here? Diagnostics, solutions, let's go. Her voice, sharp and urgent, seemed to echo in a vacuum. They responded, but slowly, mechanically. The spark was gone. She felt a despair so profound it almost broke through the field's dampening effect. This wasn't her force. These weren't her people. The colony was slowly grinding to a halt, not with a bang, but with a long, drawn-out sigh of utter indifference. The breaking point came on a day like any other quiet, grey day in the New Arcadia. In a small residential park, a few children were listlessly pushing toys in a sandbox. Among them was little Mia, Governor Thorne's 6-year-old granddaughter, a child previously known for her boundless energy and a laugh that could fill a room. Mia stumbled and scraped her knee on a decorative rock. It wasn't a bad scrape, but enough to draw blood, enough to normally elicit a yelp of pain and a rush for comfort. Instead, Mia simply sat there. She looked at her bleeding knee with a detached curiosity, her face utterly blank. No tears, no cry, no flinch. She just stared. Her mother, Sarah, Thorne's daughter, had been watching from a nearby bench, her own senses dulled by the serenity field. But the sight of her child, injured and reacting with such profound unnaturalness, pierced through the artificial calm like a shard of ice to the heart. A jolt of pure, primal terror shot through her. This wasn't her Mia. This was a doll, a husk. Sarah didn't think. She reacted. A sound tore from her throat, a sound unheard in New Arcadia for weeks, a raw, ragged scream of anguish and fury. Mia! Oh gods, what have they done to her? What have they done to US? Her scream, full of undiluted, aggressive terror and grief, was like a lit match in a gas-filled room. Heads turned. People nearby, jolted by the sheer, unfiltered emotion in her voice, felt something crack within their own carefully managed serenity. It was an alien sound, yet deeply, terrifyingly familiar. It was human. A man nearby, who had been staring blankly at a datapad, dropped it with a clatter, his eyes suddenly focusing. A woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, tears welling, real tears, hot and stinging. The sight of Sarah cradling her blank-eyed child, her body shaking with sobs and rage, was a catalyst. It was as if a dam had burst. The suppressed emotions, the fear, the frustration, the grief for their lost selves, surged forth. Not in a wave of mindless violence, but in a dawning, collective horror and a desperate, angry need to reclaim what had been stolen. Aris Thorne heard his daughter's scream from his office window, which overlooked the park. The sound cut through his own lethargy, a father's instinct overriding the field's influence. He was running before he even registered the decision, his heart pounding with a force he hadn't felt in weeks. When he reached the park, a small crowd had gathered. Sarah was still weeping, Mia now whimpering softly in her arms, confused by her mother's distress. But the faces in the crowd were alive, angry, afraid, determined. The spell was breaking. The awakening was not instantaneous, but it was swift. Sarah's cry had been the spark, and now the kindling of human spirit, long suppressed, caught fire. The news of Mia's unnervingly blank reaction and Sarah's subsequent outburst spread through the colony like wildfire, carried by voices suddenly infused with urgency and emotion. Scientists and engineers, their intellectual passions reignited by a direct threat to their very nature, converged on the colonial labs. They had been studying the Shepherd emitters passively, their curiosity blunted. Now they attacked the problem with a desperate, focused fury. "They're using a resonant biodampener," one physicist exclaimed, his eyes bright with a manic energy. "Subtle, but it's targeting neurotransmitter pathways associated with heightened emotional states, particularly dopamine and adrenaline responses linked to the amygdala." "Can we counteract it?" an engineer demanded, already sketching furiously on a datapad. "Jamming frequencies, a counter-resonance." For the first time in weeks, the labs buzzed with the chaotic, creative energy of human ingenuity under pressure. They worked with a desperate intensity, driven by a collective will to reclaim their minds. Ordinary citizens, their protective instincts now fully engaged, began organizing. Not riots, but focused acts of civil disobedience. They gathered at the emitter sites, their faces set, demanding their removal. Some, more daring, began to find ways to subtly sabotage the strange, silent shepherd drones that maintained the devices. Their fear was palpable, but so was their anger, and beneath it, a stubborn refusal to be anything less than human. Commander Eva Rostova felt the change like a physical shock. One moment, she was slogging through another pointless review of her listless troops. The next, her calm crackled with urgent, emotional voices. She saw the reports from the park, the sudden surge of activity in the labs. A fierce, almost painful joy welled up inside her. "They're waking up," she breathed. She stormed into the barracks. "All right, you statues," she roared, her voice cracking like a whip, a sound that made her soldiers, even in their dulled state, flinch and look up with something resembling alarm. Heard the news. Little Mere Thorn nearly forgot how to cry. The shepherds aren't gifting us peace, they're lobotomizing us with a smile. Are we going to stand for that? A murmur went through the ranks, a flicker of anger in one man's eyes. A woman clenched her fists. The labs are working on a counter, Rostova continued, her voice ringing with purpose. But those emitters are still active. Our job is to protect this colony. And right now, that means protecting our right to be this colony. We secure our assets. We prepare to defend our people's minds if it comes to that. Anyone still feel like a nap? A gruff "No, ma'am," rumbled back, stronger than any response she'd heard in weeks. The fire was catching. Her soldiers were still groggy, still shaking off the artificial calm, but the core of their being, the protector, the fighter, the human, was stirring. Their aggression was returning, not as a wild, uncontrolled force, but as a sharp, focused tool honed by a righteous fury. New Arcadia was fighting back, not with weapons, but with the sheer, indomitable force of its humanity. Emissary Valerius and observer Cale appeared in Governor Thorne's office. Valerius's serene composure was, for the first time, visibly strained. Cale looked genuinely alarmed. "Governor Thorne," Valerius began, his usually soothing voice tight, "we are detecting significant emotional discord, organized resistance, sabotage of the Serenity field emitters. This is regressive behavior." Thorne, no longer listless but filled with a cold, determined anger, stood to face him. "Regressive, emissary, or reclaiming what's ours. Your gift was turning us into empty shells. My granddaughter forgot how to cry because of your peace." The child's reaction was an anomaly, a momentary recalibration, Valerius insisted, though his shimmering aura flickered uncertainly. "It was an abomination," Thorne shot back, "and it woke us up." Commander Rostova entered, flanked by two of her soldiers, their eyes no longer dull but sharp and watchful. "My people are demanding the emitters be shut down, emissary. Now." Valerius looked from Thorne to Rostova, a flicker of something like disbelief in his ancient eyes. "You would reject harmony. You would choose the path of conflict, of emotional chaos." "We choose the path of being human, emissary," Rostova snapped. "You call it chaos, we call it living. You call our aggression a flaw, we call it the fire that helps us survive, adapt, protect what we love. You don't understand us at all." She turned to Cale. "Observer, you watch my troops train. You called it primal dominance. You want to see what that primal dominance is for." Before Cale or Valerius could respond, Rostova barked into her calm. "Alpha Squad, proceed with revised simulation Gamma 7. Live feed to the governor's office. Now." On the main screen in Thorne's office, a new image appeared. A live feed from the Badlands. But this wasn't a simple target practice. A complex, simulated threat scenario was unfolding. Drones, programmed to mimic advanced alien tech, perhaps even Shepard-like capabilities if they turned hostile, swarmed a fortified position. Rostova's soldiers moved with a speed, precision, and terrifying synergy that was breathtaking. They weren't just following orders. They were adapting, improvising, communicating in clipped, urgent bursts. Squads split, flanked, laid down covering fire, and then, with a burst of controlled ferocity, exploited a momentary weakness in the simulated enemy's attack pattern. One soldier, facing a seemingly impossible situation, jury-rigged a piece of their standard equipment into an unexpected countermeasure that disabled 3 hostile drones at once. Their movements were aggressive, yes, but also incredibly intelligent, creative, and fueled by an obvious desire to protect their simulated base and each other. Cale watched, his serene features frozen in an expression of dawning horror mixed with something akin to awe. This wasn't the mindless brutality he had imagined. This was problem-solving at lightning speed, teamwork forged in the crucible of simulated fire, innovation born from necessity. This was the human survival instinct, honed to a razor's edge. What the shepherds had tried to extinguish was the very engine of that resilience. This is not mere aggression," Kale murmured, his voice barely a whisper. This is adaptive evolution in motion. Valerius stared at the screen, then at the fierce, unyielding faces of Thorn and Rostova. The ancient wisdom in his eyes was now clouded with a profound, dawning comprehension of a mistake so fundamental it was almost inconceivable to his long-lived, peace-oriented species. They had mistaken a vital organ for a malignant tumor. The something else they had woken was humanity's unyielding spirit, defending its very definition of self. My apologies, I've gone over the 3,200-word target. I can stop here, or I can write a shorter conclusion for the revelation and retreat, an epilogue and advisory, parts to bring it closer, or I can trim some words from the existing text if you prefer. Let me know how you'd like to proceed. If I were to write a concise ending from this point. Valerius raised a shimmering hand. Enough, Commander, we see. The words were quiet, heavy with realization. He looked at Thorn, his ancient eyes filled not with judgment, but with a new, uncomfortable respect. We were wrong, profoundly wrong. We sought to impose our definition of peace without understanding the necessity of your fire. He gestured, and throughout New Arcadia, the soft hum of the Serenity field emitters died. The faint, sweet scent faded from the air. A collective sigh, almost a gasp, seemed to ripple through the colony as the last vestiges of the field lifted. The shepherds will depart, Valerius stated. We offer our deepest apologies for the distress our ignorance has caused. He bowed his head, a gesture of genuine humility that stunned Thorn and Rostova into silence. Then he and Kale simply faded, their forms dissolving into faint light. Moments later, the silent moonship in orbit ascended, vanishing as quietly as it had arrived. New Arcadia slowly began to heal. The return of unfiltered emotion was overwhelming at first. Joy and grief, anger and love, all felt with a raw intensity. But it was their intensity. Children's laughter, loud and unrestrained, once again filled the parks. Artists attacked their work with renewed passion, their creations imbued with the depth of their recent experience. Debates in the council chambers were noisy and often frustrating, but they were alive. Weeks later, a discreet message arrived through official interstellar channels, originating from Shepherd territory. It was an advisory, circulated widely. Regarding species designate, human, their inherent competitive drive, emotional volatility, and reactive aggression are not developmental deficiencies. They are integral components of their societal dynamism, their rapid innovation, and their profound resilience. Attempts to pacify or uplift by suppressing these core traits are not only counterproductive, but carry unforeseen and potentially catastrophic consequences for the human psyche and societal structure. Advise extreme caution and non-interference in these fundamental aspects of their psychosocial framework. They are necessary for them. Governor Thorn read the advisory, a grim smile touching his lips. Commander Rostova, standing beside him, nodded once. Took them long enough to figure it out, she said. Some things just can't be fixed. Outside, the sounds of New Arcadia, vibrant, messy, and utterly, wonderfully human, filled the air.